Your body is welcome here today, all of it. Yes, even that part. And that part. Yes, even that part. The parts you love, the parts you don't. For in this place we come with all that we are, all that we have been, and all that we are going to be. Our bodies are constantly changing. Cells die and cells are reborn. We respond to infections and disease. Sometimes we can divorce them from our bodies, and so other times they become a permanent part of us. Your body and all that is within it, both wanted and not wanted, has a place here. Our bodies join in a web of co-creation, created and creating, constantly changing us, scarred and tattooed, tense and relaxed, diseased and cured, unfamiliar and intimate, formed in infinite diversity of creation. Your body is welcome here, all of it. So take a moment and welcome it. Take a moment to feel in it. Take a moment to be in it. Our first reading today comes from a national survey by the American Psychological Association, which found that 83% of us agree that stress can have deleterious effects on our health. 94%, more than 9 out of 10, believe stress can contribute to the development of major illnesses such as heart disease, depression, and obesity. The physical symptoms of stress reported are just as wide-ranging. 42% say they have experienced irritability or anger as a symptom of stress. 39% feel nervous or anxious. 37% experience fatigue. 32% get headaches. 24% experience indigestion. Changes in appetite and libido are also reported as symptoms of stress. Emotionally, stress is just as debilitating. 30% report feeling as though they could cry. 35% lose their energy and motivation. 37% become depressed, and 44% lie awake at night. But nobody in this room, right? So stress can be very harmful, especially if nothing is done to relieve it. According to cellular biologist Dr. Bruce Lipton, the damage is done on a cellular level. In his book, The Biology of Belief, he tells us that our cells have 2 basic modes of operation, growth, and protection, but they can only operate in one mode at a time. In the growth mode, the cell exchanges material with its environment freely. Nutrients come in, waste products go out, and the cell performs its function as it should and reproduces itself before it wears out. When the protection mode kicks in response to a perceived threat, internal or external, growth processes screech to a halt. This is the mode that stress puts us in, and it's a completely natural reaction. When facing a hungry lion, you need every speck of your energy, attention, and physical anticipation is focused exclusively on the lion. Growth can wait. In response to hormones produced by the pituitary and adrenal glands, cells retreat within themselves, stop exchanging with their environments, build up toxic wastes, and stop dividing. It goes on long enough. If it goes on long enough, the cell dies. But running from a lion doesn't take long. Our cells get over it. Living with lions, as we do in today's fast-paced, overextended, overcommitted world, is a different story. If we don't manage the stress in our lives, it can literally destroy us. We know that. But we also know that stress is a natural and inescapable part of life. So what's a person to do? One answer is sanctuary. The earliest known sanctuary lies in the cave of Chevat, southern France, where around 35,000 years ago, the Aurignacian people painted images of animals that sustained their lives. These breathtaking images are not there to decorate a living space. In fact, there's no evidence of human occupation in the cave. So the people there must have come there for some other purpose. All we know for sure is that they did in the cave was paint. And they did so with astonishing style and sophistication and precision. Images of the animals that assured their survival. And so it seems reasonable to assume that somehow, through incantations, psychedelic sacraments, or ritual frenzies, people must have used this space to supplicate, celebrate, and commune with the forces of nature. Here we can imagine them entering the spirit world and experiencing epiphany and undergoing transformation. We can easily envision the cave, along with similar sites such as the one in Lascaux and Altamira, as places where Paleolithic people left the ordinary world behind. Absolute darkness and unnatural silence engulfed their senses. Sensations were heightened, perceptions stretched, anxieties suspended, stresses transcended. Flickering firelight brought the animal drawings to life. Dramatic reverberations gave songs and incantations a magical quality. The very spirit of the place was transformational. In today's world, such sanctuaries are needed more than ever before.
Good morning again. Please understand that this is the first time I have shared this story in public. So please forgive me if I'm not able to maintain my composure all the way through this sermon. When I was 17, I went to a party with my boyfriend. At that party, one of the guests handed me a drink, which I politely accepted. A few days later, friends of ours got word that the young man who handed me the drink had come down with hepatitis, and that we all had to go to the hospital or the doctor to get a gamma globulin shot. So that's what we did. I went to the doctor with my boyfriend to get our shots together, but it turned out that my boyfriend's parents didn't have the money to pay for his shot, so I gave him mine. Several days after that, I started experiencing symptoms of hepatitis. With my medical records showing that I had the gamma globulin shot, the doctors had no idea what was wrong with me. I was in the hospital for days without treatment. Finally, my boyfriend realized what had happened and called the hospital to inform them. But by that time, I was in the dying process. My liver was ravaged. My fever was through the roof. The last thing I remember was lying in my hospital bed while doctors in full hazmat suits sprinkled alcohol all over my body to try to cool me down. The next thing I knew, I was traveling through a long tunnel. The same tunnel, I suppose, that many people see in near-death experiences. Then into a luminous place of white light. There I was greeted by the most intense fragrance that I'd ever smelled. And somehow I knew that this fragrance was the essence of Jesus. There I was told I would assist people who were suffering from stress by giving them transformational experiences of nurturing, compassion, and sanctuary. Back then, I didn't even know what transformational experience was, but I remembered those words. I was told in that white light that there would be 5 Sanctuary for Life centers in various places around the world where people could come and experience profound healing and rejuvenating experiences that would change their lives. I was also told to show people how to create sanctuary experiences for themselves, wherever they might be. This, I was told, was to be my mission in life. I have been pursuing that mission ever since. I operated my first sanctuary in Northeast Dallas, where guests would come and get a massage, a foot rub, a meal of their favorite delicacies, soft lighting, peaceful music, a rose petal bath, and time alone to journal, pray, meditate, cry, or just contemplate their lives. So I had a sense of what each one needed. It was a gift that I brought back from visiting the White Light. And I served pretty much anyone in need of stress release, especially women. Then I met Christiane and set out on a journey that would change my mission forever. I met Christiane at Brighton Bush Hot Springs. It's a retreat and intentional community deep in the Oregon rainforest, a community of hippie and solstice celebrators. I had gone there on a spur-of-the-moment business side excursion on a business trip I was on, and I was so inspired by the people and the hot springs and the nature of the entire place that I started going there on my own on a regular basis, just to enjoy the hot springs, the solitude, take some photographs and write in my journal. That's what I was doing the day I met Christiane. I was sitting in my cabin's one wooden chair at a simple wooden desk, journaling. It was a beautiful day, and I had the door to my cabin open. So when I heard someone walking by outside, I looked up to see this incredibly gorgeous woman in a long, flowing white cotton robe, peacefully walking by. She had a dark, flawless complexion, long jet black hair down to her hips, a perfect body, and a beautiful Mediterranean face. As a photographer, I was so mesmerized by this woman's beauty that I found myself leaning over in order to watch her for as long as I could as she passed by my cabin. I leaned over so far that I lost my balance and landed on the floor with a loud and embarrassing thud. She stopped ever so gracefully and said in an exotic French accent, "Is everything all right?" From the floor, I looked up and said, "Yes, I'm fine. You are so beautiful." And she replied, "Thank you. So are you." I knew right then and there she was a kind person, because that was really a kind thing to say to a woman sprawled out on the floor. And somewhere in the process of picking myself up, I got a vision of a photograph I felt I had to take. So I went down the steps and said, "May I photograph you at the Meadow Tub Hot Springs today?" She looked deeply into my eyes, smiled, and said, "What time?" I replied, 4 o'clock. I would love your hair pulled back in a braid, and I see you sitting on the edge of the hot spring. And at 4 o'clock, there she was on the edge of the hot spring with her hair in a braid. And this is the picture I took. After I photographed her, I gave this beautiful woman my address so she could write me and tell me where to send a copy of her picture. And we went our separate ways. She wrote me, and I sent her a print. You couldn't email pictures in those days, so I sent her a print and a note stating, "I hope that we would see each other again." She replied, and we started corresponding. We wrote letters and spoke on the phone. We became very close friends and went on trips and women's retreats together. She and her husband visited me in Dallas, and I would visit her and her husband in Oregon. She had become a treasured friend. By that time, I was operating a sanctuary in a 5,000 square foot luxury home in a gated community in North Dallas, thanks to the donations of a generous benefactor who sold limited edition artwork laser printed on canvas. This is the one they made using the photograph of Christiane I had shot at Brighton Bush. It sold out. Now it's the way I remember Christiane. You see, it was about that time that I got a phone call from Christiane. She was crying. She said, "Sweetie," that's what she called me. "Sweetie," she said, "I have breast cancer." I was so shocked, but tried not to let her know I was crying. Then I told her that I would support whatever treatment decision she made, because that's the way I want to be treated if anything like that should happen to me. With enough resources to have the finest doctors in the world, Christiane chose to go 100% holistic. She flew all over the world, visiting mystical healers like John of God in Brazil. On a woman's retreat we took together to Tepoztlan, Mexico, she visited a world-renowned fire shaman. She tried New Age healers. She tried alternative medicine practitioners. She tried everything, but nothing worked. She got worse and worse. Then one day she called from Prien, Germany, where she was getting her plasma changed out every day except for weekends, in yet another attempt at an alternative cure. She said her caregiver had to return home to America due to a family emergency, and she needed somebody to take her place for a few weeks. Of course, I said yes. So I flew into Munich, where a driver took me to the cottage in Prien, Germany, that her husband had rented for her. When I entered her upstairs bedroom, I was hit by the smell of death. It was not intense. It was not as intense as it would eventually become, but it was definitely there. I had to request a bedroom in the basement to keep from being overwhelmed by it. Christiane's caregiver wanted to give me a briefing right then and there. She wanted to show me the 2 food markets where I would buy the fresh food daily, which was the European way. She wanted to show me the route to the pharmacy, the hospital, which was a lot of information to take in. But I was jet-lagged and I needed some rest. So the next morning, when the caregiver showed me my responsibilities, I was very grateful for a good night's sleep. She explained that my responsibilities would include emptying and cleaning Christiane's urine receptacle first thing every morning. Then I was to get her dressed, which was a very delicate, very slow process because Christiane had become so frail and fragile at that point. That's how I learned that moving at a patient's speed is one of the most frustrating parts of caregiving, because you're so aware of all the things that have to get done as the day progresses. It's like running through a big vat of molasses. Next, I had to make Christiane her oatmeal, which she was very particular about, then to take her to the hospital for treatment. That involved getting out her very heavy wheelchair. They didn't have lightweight wheelchairs in those days, especially in Europe. Getting her into the chair, wheeling the chair to the car, getting her out of the chair and into the car, loading the very heavy wheelchair back into the trunk, and driving to the hospital. Getting the chair out of the trunk, getting her into the chair, wheeling the chair into the treatment room, and getting her undressed. Hanging her clothes in the closet, then getting into bed, where she was hooked up to a huge $75,000 bag of crystal clear plasma. This process made her shiver terribly. She shivered so badly that I couldn't watch it, and I had to leave. When she became aware of my discomfort, she got it, and she would say, "Sweetie, you go ahead, I'll be okay." So I would get about 3 hours off, but during that time I had to go to the market because her procedure drained her so much that I had to bring her fresh fruit, cut into small bite-sized pieces, just to give her enough energy to get back home. Then I would get her clothes out of the closet, get her dressed, into the wheelchair, out to the car, into the car, wheelchair into the trunk, and then drive. Sometimes she wanted to go to the lake. Prien is on the shore of a big, beautiful lake. So I would drive her there, get the chair out of the trunk, get her out of the car and into the chair, and wrap her in a blanket. Sometimes she wanted to talk. Sometimes she wanted just to be alone. When she wanted to be alone, I would watch from a nearby tree until she looked around and let me know that she was ready to go. Then I would take her home and set her up on the outdoor patio or inside on a comfortable couch, wherever she wanted to be, until dinner. That gave me about an hour before I had to start cooking. The previous caregiver had shown me a bicycle as part of my briefing and told me that it was the only thing that was going to keep me okay during this process. So I would get on the bike every afternoon and ride down a long, beautiful path in the German countryside. Along the path, a train would come by, and people would wave at me. It's funny how much a little thing like that came to mean to me. This was to be my only time alone, the only break I could look forward to. Each day, I would take the path a little further until one day I came to a bridge where I stopped and sat with my feet dangling on the edge. Watching the sparkling water, I found myself looking deep inside myself and asking, "Is this my calling?" And the answer came back, "I don't think so." I was exhausted just thinking about it. Then it was back on the bike, ride back to the cottage and make dinner, ending with a special protein shake prescribed by her doctor. By the time I got Christiane into bed, I was ready for bed myself. The next morning, I made her oatmeal. She hated it, and it was the words that she had said to her previous caregiver that just came stinging back to me. She had told her, "You're the best caregiver of all, and no one will ever be as good as you." Her rejection of the oatmeal I had made her pierced me to the core. I felt defeated. I was so dejected and exhausted. I could barely remember where the garbage was and where the recycling was and where to carry it out and what to do next. The next day, I tried to make her oatmeal creamier, but it seemed like nothing I did was good enough. I have since learned that it is normal behavior for people in her situation. They're scared and they vent. It's not personal, but at the time it felt very personal and awful. Then one night, Christiane developed a high fever and needed to go to the hospital. It's amazing how much more difficult the now familiar route was at night. Out of the bed, into the chair, out to the car, into the hospital, out of the chair and into bed. When I got her settled in her room, she asked for a mirror. When I gave her a mirror, she looked into it and said, "Sweetie, I've lost my light." I said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Look into my eyes. Do you see the light?" I didn't want to lie. I had told her I would never lie to her. So I said, "Christiane, it'll come back. It'll come back." They kept her in the hospital for a few days, and I was still carrying stuff back and forth, but I did get a little bit of a break. Like all caregivers, we just need a little bit of a break sometimes. I knew it was getting outdoors and moving my body that kept me from going off the edge. In a few weeks, Christiane's former caregiver came home, flew back, and I flew back to Dallas. And it had only been home a short period of time when I woke up one night with severe chest pain. I was so connected to Christiane at that point. I knew the pain was hers, it wasn't mine. So I called her husband to tell him that she was in trouble. Please check her heart. He told me she had a physical the day before and assured me, under the circumstances, that she was okay. But the following day, he called and said, "How did you know?" It turns out she had a blood clot next to her heart, and the doctors had told her that that is how she would die. So she returned to her home in Ojai, California, and I went there to be with her in her last days. Then I learned that the physical stress of caregiving is not the greatest stress caregivers have. The greatest stress is emotional. I remember one of Christiane's last wishes was to be put in her chair and wheeled into her kitchen, where she opened and smelled her spices, one at a time, savoring for the last time each exotic fragrance. Her sister and I were with her and smelling the spices as well, savoring that last moment like she was savoring those spices. Towards the very end, the light returned, and we handed her a mirror, saying, "Look, Christiane, look how beautiful you are. The light in your eyes has returned." And she looked into the mirror and said, "Yes, I am beautiful. The light has returned." As she looked into that mirror, it was like her sister and I weren't even there. When I reached out to take the mirror from her, she said, "No, I'm not finished," and just kept marveling at the light in her eyes. It was a transcendent moment, one that I will never, ever forget. Then at the very end, her husband offered her a $7,000 injection from the Santa Barbara hospital that would let her live one more day, 24 hours longer. But she said no. I knew right then and there that she was ready to go. But she needed permission, and it was her husband's permission she needed. I told her husband that we would bathe her and put her in bed, and then asked him to bathe and put on his best pajamas and join her in bed, embrace her, and give her his permission. At first, her husband didn't want to hear of it, but after he had some time with it, and with tears in his eyes, he agreed and did as requested. It was a very bittersweet moment. He told her he loved her and then told her goodbye. Christiane spoke to each of us alone, then started calling her friends and relatives all over the world to say goodbye. This went on for hours. It was a challenge to keep the phones charged. When she was done, I said goodbye to her, and I flew back to Dallas. She died shortly thereafter. That's how I learned that caregiving goes much deeper than most people think. It certainly goes deeper than I thought it did. The physical demands are stressful, but the emotional strain is more stressful. That's why caregivers burn out from the stress. That's why they often die before the one they're caring for. And that's why I changed my mission to providing care for the caregivers, because they truly deserve sanctuary. Today, Sanctuary for Life helps caregivers relieve their stress by providing them with a comfortable and inspiring sanctuary space designed to trigger relaxation responses through every sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste they experience. They can get a massage or have their feet anointed with oil, take a walk along the creek, or just watch deer graze. They can read, journal, meditate, or do whatever brings them joy in completely natural and peaceful surroundings. The results are often beyond anyone's expectations. Brochures for both High Hope Ranch and Deer Creek Sanctuary will be available for you in the fellowship hall after the sermon. But as I said earlier, and as I learned so clearly during my time with Christiane, the big thing is just getting a break. Earlier, I asked who among you were or had been a caregiver. Now I would like to ask you, how many of you know a caregiver? Oh my. Well, if you do, maybe you're the one that can give them a break. It's not always practical to offer to take over someone's caregiving responsibilities for a time. Sometimes care regimens are just too complex. But where it is practical, just giving a caregiver time to go for a walk in the park, visit with friends, or go take in a movie might mean more to them than you could ever know. Ask if there's a way you can take over their duties for an afternoon, a day, a weekend. Maybe they would just like someone to talk with, someone who moves at regular speed rather than patient speed. Sometimes just knowing that someone cares what they're going through is enough to bring relief. You'll never know unless you ask. That is my message here today. Caregivers, we care about you. We love you, and we honor you. May you know the peace that comes from being profoundly appreciated. May you know the fulfillment that only comes from selflessly caring for another. And may another be there to do the same for you, should you ever need caregiving. Who cares for the caregiver? Let it be you. Thank you very much.